Hey guys, The Shadow here, and I'm proud to welcome you to part 3 of The Coming South. This series has proved very good for my mental health, and it seems that it's ruining yours, the lovely listener, so I'm going to keep bringing it to you. So lock your doors, bar your windows, turn out the lights, and relax. For you need to prepare yourself fully for The Coming Part 3, South. This won't hurt too much. The air had a dusty taste as Mary walked up the street from work. The sun had begun setting, casting many elongated shadows across the dirt road. Mary's step was a little lighter today. Though she had just finished a 100-hour work week, she had her first day off in a long time. Mary worked at a rather upscale hotel in the town center. It was the busiest and nicest hotel in this smallish town, which meant a high demand for cleanliness and service. When she was first hired, her only duty was to man the front desk, working 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. Not even 3 days into her employment, however, she soon found herself running the front desk, maintenance, room service, cleaning, and every other operation. There were only a few other people employed at the hotel, so she didn't have much grounds to demand her rights to only have to work so much per week. Mary had moved to the South when she was in her early 20s, brought down by an organization straight out of college to teach English. Now, years later, she found herself in the same position as almost any other person living in the South. Jobs were hard to come by, so once you found one, you would hold on to it for dear life, tolerating anything and everything that occurred. This was Mary's 5th or so year working for the hotel. When the organization went out of business due to tax fraud, Mary was out of a job, so she had to start looking before her meager amount of savings ran out. After making many phone calls and emails, and faxing a resume to anyone she could find, she had quite the resume dilemma. Many of the jobs that required the experience she gained from the organization turned her away due to the reference not being listed. She could have listed that, but the scandal surrounding the organization was so large that she didn't want to have any association with it. Any other place she applied gave her trouble when her resume showed a blank period for more than 5 years, and when she elaborated she couldn't say exactly why she wasn't working, mostly out of self-image. Most people turned her away, and the few times she explained the situation about the organization, the potential employer threw her out the door. All this, and there was the fact that Mary was American. Finally, she landed an interview with this hotel, and after giving many vague references and half-truths, she was hired. A car sped by Mary, covering her from head to toe with dust. Normally, she would have screamed insults at that car, as she only had one work uniform and had to keep it clean, but today was different. Just as the last rays of the sun disappeared below the horizon, Mary arrived at her front door. She unlocked it and walked inside, flicking the light switch as she walked past it, only for nothing to happen. Sighing inwardly, she felt her way to the dining room table and groped for the gas lantern that stayed there for such occurrences. Mary's home was run down. The power only worked maybe a third of the time, the water leaked, and there was no heat. It was a 3-room house, no bigger than a large garden shed in America, and that was all she could afford. She didn't need much, though, and she was grateful to have what she had. She didn't have a TV, computer, or even a radio. She did have a cell phone, but that was only to keep kept on while she was working. She had no real connection to the rest of the world, and as the years went by, that lack of connection really started to grow on her. Removing her work uniform and tossing it in the bathroom hamper, she turned the hot knob of the bath-shower combo and pulled the shower thing. A weak stream of water flowed through the rusted shower head. Now fully undressed, Mary climbed into the shower and winced when the cold water made contact with her skin. It then dawned on her, without power, there's no hot water. Even at the best of times, the water was still barely lukewarm, but it was still better than what she was enduring now. She finished cleaning up and stepped out of the shower, cursing when she noticed that, yet again, she forgot a towel. Now cold and wet, there were only 2 options. Option A, go get her towel and get water everywhere and then have more cleaning, but be warm right away, or Option B, stand there naked and freezing until her body dried enough not to get water everywhere, and then make a beeline for her towel. In this case, she chose the former, as there was no work to worry about the next day, so she could just focus on herself. There wasn't much to clean up by the time Mary had retrieved her towel, dried off, and dressed in an old pair of flannel pajamas that had at one point belonged to former President Jimmy Carter. She had bought the pajamas at an estate sale a few doors down when she lived in America. She had always had such a divine fascination with Jimmy Carter, and when she had an opportunity to own something that had been his, there wasn't even a second thought. Of course, the former president had been dead going on 2 years, and the thought of him brought tears to Mary's eyes. Many people view days off from work as a time to relax, but all Mary wanted to do was work on her days off. She would do the laundry and clean the house, and once all that stuff was done, she would recline on the broken sofa with a pen and paper, and usually a beer. She had a huge aspiration to become a writer, part of what landed her the job at the organization. She was studying at Harvard to be an English major with a minor in psychology, as her dream was to write the great American novel one day. Now her dream was only just that. A dream, a thought, a notion, an idea, or just something to do to pass the time on her days off. An idea had been running through her mind, the combination of her two education fields. From psychology, she had studied the drugging and other experiments conducted by government organizations throughout the years, and had many theories based on these experiments, including, can the subjects in the same test have a shared physical or spiritual, mostly spiritual, experience if all the subjects in the same if all the variables these subjects receive are identical? An idea for a novel chronicling the lives of all the subjects before, during, and after the test was born from her background in English. She knew this idea, no matter how preposterous, would make for an amazing book. Notes and mental images had been circulating throughout her mind as she worked at the hotel, building more and more, and when she pulled out her pen and paper once at home, there was a waterfall of letters and punctuation flowing from the pen onto the paper. Cascading paragraphs and quotations and wordplay formed a pool at the bottom of this waterfall and threatened to spill off the page, but Mary was prepared for this with more paper. The tide began to ebb, ironically, as her pen began to run out of ink. She looked at the huge stack of papers in front of her, and then to the small clock on the wall. She noted, rather disjointedly, that she had been writing for 4 hours straight. The stack of papers in front of her could have been a manuscript waiting on the desk of a publisher. Throwing the pen at the door, she moved the papers to the first page and began to read. She flipped faster and faster through each page, not reading anymore, but fully realizing the scope of what she had accomplished in the scant previous 4 hours. These pages in front of her contained all of the beauty of a Mandavi painting, all of the grace of a majestic eagle soaring on an updraft over a mountain, and all the rawness of an unripe banana. She couldn't possibly have written this. It did lack an ending though, which was odd, but that thought wasn't at the forefront of her mind at that moment. Rearranging the papers back in their original order, she also noted that her beer was now empty. 3 days later, Mary walked an unfathomable transition from dirt to paved road. She was to be 15 minutes early, same as every other day. This didn't bother her much now, but it certainly took some getting used to. She arrived 15 minutes and 18 seconds early, climbed the steps to the double doors that marked the entrance to the hotel, and grabbed the handle of the left door and pulled. She had been doing this every day for the last 5 years, and it came as a surprise to her that the door didn't open. She tried pushing on the door. Still nothing. She repeated the 2 previous actions on the right door, and still got the same result. A wild thought crossed her head, making her laugh heartily for the first time since really when she first arrived and was teaching English. Every day that I've come here, the doors automatically unlock precisely 15 minutes before I'm supposed to work. But Mary usually recalled seeing guests and staff enter and leave the front doors from down the way before Mary even arrived at work. Near the convenience store, there was a payphone. Mary walked over to it and called her boss. No answer. There was a jangle as her change dropped into the coin return. She put the coins back in the slot and called the hotel. No answer there. It did eventually go to the machine, and she left a message. There was a clunk and slight jangle as the coins thumped into the bowels of the payphone. Mary decided to stay in the town center and sit on a bench, keeping a watch on the hotel entrance in case there was some activity and she needed to go there right away. Looking up, the sign in front of her displayed 7:03 a.m., January 17, 2018, 79 degrees Fahrenheit. If the hotel was open, she would have been 3 minutes late for work by now. Still watching the hotel doors, Mary let her mind wander back to the time spent at the organization. She remembered the first day that a handsome man in a nice suit with dark eyes approached her as she walked towards where she locked her bicycle up when she went to class. He introduced himself as George, and then got right down to the point. "What's your field of education?" asked George. "English major, psychology minor, and musical staccato," replied Mary, in a slightly facetious tone of voice. George laughed, and then immediately offered her a position in the South teaching English when she completed her studies. Mary jumped at the idea, getting her bicycle unlocked and hopping on, almost forgetting to thank George in that moment of excitement brought on by his offer. She dismounted and blushing as she looked at George, She dismounted and then blushed as she looked at George, who had a slight smile touching his face, as if he shared in Mary's excitement to the level that she did, but was trying to keep cool and calm, and was doing a damn good job of it. George shook her hand and handed her a business card. "Call me when you're ready," George said, and then turned and walked off towards an expensive-looking car idling at the curb. Mary rushed home and told her parents of the news, and while they were happy for her, there was a dark worry behind their eyes that Mary didn't understand at the time, but looking back, now she did. Coming back to reality, Mary noticed a small gathering of people near the sign where the clock and date and time were displayed. Mary stood up, all thoughts of the hotel gone, curiosity overtaking her as she saw, or initially heard, from near the center of the gathering of people. It was a smartphone with a live news broadcast playing. Mary only caught the last few words, but the realization hit her, as the news was of America's plan of ending World War III was bomb strikes launched at all the nation's enemies. Mary ran down the middle of the street, pulling out her cell phone as she ran and dialing her boss's home number. He answered on maybe the third ring, to Mary asking what the work situation was today. Her boss, sounding slightly irritated, replied that until we can rule out the bomb threats, the hotel will remain closed. Then, as Mary started to ask how this closure would affect her weekly paycheck, her boss interjected and told her she didn't need to worry. Mary arrived home and went to the fridge. Grabbing a beer, she walked over to the couch and sat down with a pad and new pen. Taking a sip of beer, she began to go over the last few days' events in her mind. Friday, weekend off, took a shower and forgot my towel. Okay. Saturday, slept all day, got a few groceries when I woke up. Sunday, strange writing occurs, mental blackout for 4 hours. Mary sat at her table. Her boss and his wife were on their living room couch watching a daytime soap opera. George sat in prison, waiting for a visit from his lawyer. Mary sat at her table. Her boss and his wife were on the living room couch watching a daytime soap opera. George sat in prison, waiting for a visit from his lawyer. Mary sat at her table. Her boss and his wife were on the living room couch watching a daytime soap opera. George sat in prison, waiting for a visit from his lawyer. Mary sat at her table. Her boss and his wife were on their living room couch watching a daytime soap opera. George sat in prison, waiting for a visit from his lawyer. Mary sat at her table, empty beer bottle on the floor beside her. She stared straight ahead as the light in the room faded all around her. A shard of glass from one of the broken windows protruded from her chest. Her boss and his wife were nothing more than a pulp now, piled in front of the blank TV, a large piece of ceiling on what used to be their laps. George dragged himself along a paved road, not unlike the one that Mary used every day to walk to work. He was missing the lower part of his left leg. The stump was mangled as if the wound were created by a wild animal, but in reality, George found himself outside of the prison cell. His left leg stuck through the bars of the door of his cell, which was no longer in its frame. Metal shrapnel was everywhere, and so, using one of the pieces, George sawed through his leg over the course of 2 hours, eventually freeing himself from the door. He was the only person to die in this bomb strike that leveled the town and killed everyone there, only due to blood loss. His was the only death not linked to damage from the bomb. This was all purely self-inflicted, as his desire for freedom outweighed any logic or reason to find a safer way to do so. 48 hours later, American troops deployed as first responders came to what was left of the town. Among them were Mary's parents, her father, a 3-star general, and her mother, a staff sergeant. They found her home in the most incoincidental way. There was a trail of stuff affected by the blast, beginning with a pair of flannel pajamas to a small clock that used to hang on Mary's wall. They walked inside to find Mary still sitting at the table, dead eyes staring at a large pile of papers in the back left corner of the table. Her parents wept for a moment, then collected the pile of papers after reading through some of them, and immediately took them back to their superior, the director of the CIA. "Sir," Mary's father said, "I think we have the solution."